So thank you for coming. Thank you to Sonic Acts for inviting me here. My name is Martin Howse, and at some point during this lecture stroke performance, hopefully you can hear me well, I'll explain what I'm doing. At the moment I'm talking, so that needs little explanation. And I wasn't here this morning, but preparing this, but hopefully this forms some kind of bridge between this morning's concerns with light and dark and this afternoon's concerns with electromagnetics. So my main concern, my main interest right now is to somehow open the voice to light. And the domain of electromagnetics is conceived often as a dark or invisible other, a conspiracy of unseen fields and forces. Yet within a continuum, a full spectrum, this domain embraces all light and its absence. So light is nothing but electromagnetics. There's a continuum embracing radio. So what I'm interested in is the subjection of words themselves to material change. This was my primary interest in electromagnetics, was how meaning, language, words, this material thing becomes transformed when it's put on top of a high-frequency carrier, how this carrier is not something which is there to be ignored, but somehow this is putting some, some spirit, some voice, some meaning into something which is a very material thing. So I'm interested in being able to subject the voice and its words to entropy and decay, to cover those words, to make a deathly shout and a scream of a dark interpreter, which is a shadow in the light. And while I was, thinking of this subjection of words to material change, I came across this passage from Dante's Inferno, which I'll attempt to read out, even though it's actually hard to. The irony of this lecture performance is I can't actually see what I've written, so, but it needs to be so, as you'll understand shortly. So just bear with me one moment. So this is from the 13th canto, The Forest of the Suicides. Dante is amongst, or within this forest. Puzzled, I raised my hand a bit and slowly broke off a branchlet from an enormous thorn, and the great trunk of it cried, "Why'd you break me?" And after the blood had darkened all the bowl of the wound, it cried again, "Why'd you tear me? Is there no pity left in any soul? Men we were, and now we are changed to sticks. Well might your hand have been more merciful, were we no more than souls of lice and ticks. As a green branch with one end all aflame will hiss and sputter sap out of the other, as the air escapes, so from that trunk there came words and blood together, gout by gout." So this is an example of words as some material, not as light, but as blood, with these trees not as anthropomorphic, to relate to yesterday's thematics. So, to begin explaining what I'm attempting to do here, or will attempt to do here, I had the bright idea. We get the pun? To subject this text to light, which is this apparatus which you see in front of me, but we're not hearing this subjection of my words to light. We're not seeing this at the present time. This is inert. So I had this idea, which I attempt to put into practice, and I came across an article within a column called The Amateur Scientist, which was maybe lasting 80 years on a monthly basis, this column within the Scientific American magazine. And this article was called "How an Electric Field Can Modulate Light by Changing the Refractivity of a Crystal." This was by C.L. Stong, July 1962, and he starts off positing some idea of communication by way of modulated light into deep space and so on, with multiple signals being imposed on light waves, making use of this twisting polarization wave electromagnetic light properties. So actually bending light and being able to, change its intensity with a high frequency or with a voice. So I was looking at this article, and I like the idea, of having some kind of crystal which would deform light according to my voice. There was only one problem, which was, good question, so I attempted to grow these potassium dihydrogen phosphate crystals in a jar on the windowsill. I have them here. And if I demonstrate with the laser, by placing one of them in the beam, carefully, you'll see that it more or less blocks the light. I mean, my fingers are also blocking the light, but you get the idea that the crystal is too cloudy and too imperfect, too many surfaces. It's not a perfect crystal, so this is already a poor starting point to the possibility of subjecting my voice to some kind of bending or twisting within the electromagnetic domain by way of this potassium dichromate or KDP crystal. So the next step was to think of other slightly more simple methodologies, and I came across this liquid crystal display, or LCD, which is, a more packaged equivalent of this crystal bending of light, which is making use of what is called a twisted pneumatic field. And we have two polarization plates, so it's more or less like if it wasn't for this liquid crystal, no light would pass through this cell that we see here. But when I apply an electric current to the liquid crystal, it twists and bends the light, which allows light then to pass through these two polarized plates on either side. But I don't want to become too concerned with the technology of this. So what I will do now is, before I start to work with this crystal setup, which will form 3 acts, I think. Yeah. I just read out 2 quotations which relate to the subject of my interest in this material transformation. The first is from George Chapman, who was a 16th century English poet who wrote a long poem called The Shadow of Night. This was in 1594. And I'll read 2 fragments. All you possessed with independent spirits, endued with nimble and aspiring wits, come consecrate to me, to sacred night, your whole endeavors, and detest the light. No pen can anything eternal write that is not steeped in humor of the night. Further on. Men's faces glitter and their hearts are black, but thou, great mistress of heaven's gloomy rack, are black in face and glitterest in thy heart. There is thy glory, riches, force, and art. And the second quotation from Georges Bataille, The Accursed Share, concerning slavery. The same poverty that extends over human life as extends over the countryside if the weather is overcast. Overcast weather, when the sun is filtered by the clouds and the play of light goes dim, appears to reduce things to what they are. The error is obvious. What is before me is never anything less than the universe. The universe is not a thing, and I am not at all mistaken when I see its brilliance in the sun. If the sun is hidden, I more clearly see the barn, the field, the hedgerow. I no longer see the splendor of the light that played over the barn. Rather, I see this barn or this hedgerow like a screen between the universe and me. So what I'll begin to do is to start the second act, which is, describing the darkest of days, and what we'll end with in the third act, by way of a second act, which is an alembic or distillation process. The third act will be to end with the brightest of days. So one could think that we're still within autumn. So the first act is a reading from John Donne, 17th century English poet, a nocturnal upon St. Lucia's Day, which is, or was, December the 13th, the shortest day of the year. Tis the year's midnight, and it is the day's Lucy's, who scarce 7 hours herself unmasks. The sun is spent, and now his flasks send forth light squibs, no constant rays. The world's whole sap is sunk. The general balm thy hydroptic earth hath drunk, whither, as to the bed's feet life is shrunk. Dead and interred, yet all those seem to laugh, compared with me, who am their epitaph. Study me then, you who shall lovers be, at the next world, that is, at the next spring, for I am every dead thing, in whom love wrought new alchemy, for his art did express a quintessence even from nothingness, from dull privations and lean emptiness. He ruined me, and I am rebegot of absence, darkness, death, things which are not. All others, from all things to all that's good, life, soul, form, spirit, whence they being have. I, by love's limbeck, am the grave of all that's nothing. Oft a flood have we too wept, and so drown the whole world, us too. Oft did we grow to be two chaoses, when we did so care to aught else, and often absences withdrew our souls and made us carcasses. But I am by her death, which word wrongs her, of the first nothing, the elixir grown. Were I a man, that I were one, I needs must know, I should prefer, if I were any beast, some ends, some means, yea plants, yea stones to test, and love, all some properties invest. If I an ordinary nothing were, a shadow, a light, and body must be here. But I am none, nor will my sun renew. You lovers for whose sake the lesser sun at this time to the goat is run, to fetch new lust and give it you. Enjoy your summer all, since she enjoys her long night's festival. Let me prepare towards her, and let me call this hour her vigil and her eve, since this, both the years and the days' deep midnight is. So this is the second act through the distillation, the limbeck. It is too easy to say that the autumnal alembic of any nature is broken or smashed by a science without seasons and cycles, accepting the measured fluctuations of branching, hardened, tailed toxic rivulets of sulfur sticking as crystalline in the flasks on masks, or cyanide running down from the White Hotel, the Mount Royal, which also cannot be seasoned. For that is also seeming circular, this dure metallica cycle of mining, vampire earth containments, leaky synthetics, refinement, and a forthcoming technology which then gets returned to the earth. And what precisely is being violated? A hunted, stagged Diana cybernetic four-who loop attends a bachelor party machine, embodied as any circuit made from the earth, as both violation, its application, and completion. Return zero. Autumn is violation. A confusion of tailings is mentally alembibed, to fall down on the side of capital or entropy, accumulations in verse, considered as natural precisely where obscenely there is no nature. For it is presented that we are either all nature, as science would have it, the unconscious chartered, or no nature, heirs apparent to either a burning or emptied schizoid earth crown or throne, either in that whole container or with no outsiders. It all begins with a season of earth, a cycle, and a dream, but it can't begin again in death or entropic tailing graft. I can only insist that it's always necessary autumn in heaven, that in autumn slime time is crystalline, both with a marked mycelium beginning and not an end. There is always a time for fermentation and for putrefaction, for seasons of a writing which returns and is always revisiting, but which could perhaps be subject to decay. For the words themselves to be subjected as things to fire and dissolution, they would need to be molded of matter, and to admit the voiceless noise of angels. The letters and symbols forming these words, forged in crystal, locked in concrete, dragged through the snow as a bell calls, would previously have been written as a book of nature, now sadly declined and decaying, attempting to be refined, but as surely as it is outside that dream, it is destroyed by science, thrown away as it reveals a contained nothing and must be surpassed for engineering and thus uselessly mourned. This hidden place of the now, where symbolic borders, where language becomes material change at quantum level, where words are subjected to literal and not literal unangeled noise, like the simple noise goes from machine transmissions, where they become in themselves registers of shit. This non-place is the CPU of central processing, anchoring any technology. The deteriorating book of nature is saved as all salvage, an electronic wastebasket, as a processable circuit skewed and etched in nature, an up-mind substrate, necessary admitting that decline and declension of noise. Written in an imposed sense, the dark interpreter is nothing other than as being able to subject words to material change. There is always the desire to, on the surface, invert a magic which would subject materials to a transformation enacted by words, which is thus the same as things, so that now these words change, do become as things, do become the expressed words of nature, where there is no difference between the thing named and the thing that is multiplied and branching schizoid atoms, that is things that can be subject to. And entropy, this is just to show and indicate the dark interpreter at work, that this can be done to any container, that it must finally give words to death, and death to words. vessel and dissolution in a dream. The dark interpreter is that which is written as words only. No flesh, no one transcendent body. Words not of earth nor in the earth, but in a lake, in the terror and delight of the lone lake, which is the eternal truth. The processor is not broken, buried, muddled, melted. Instructions are not pinned backwards and driven heartily, without reason, into the earth. So this is the final act, which may be too bright. So a warning. Can we have the lights up, please?